You know, in just a little over a decade, one man completely redrew the map of the ancient world. This is the story of Alexander the Great, and it's a wild tale of ambition, pure genius, and some pretty brutal conquest. And it all begins not with a massive empire, but with a seriously messed up family.
So that's the big question we're tackling today, right? How on earth did a 20-year-old kid from Macedonia, which, let's be honest, was kind of the middle of nowhere back then, manage to topple the mighty Persian Empire, a superpower that had dominated the world for centuries? Well, the answer starts way before the first battle. It starts right in his own home.
Okay, so let's rewind. We're going back to 356 BC to the Kingdom of Macedonia. Now, this wasn't the center of Greek culture like Athens or Sparta, not even close, but it was a rising military power, and right at the heart of it was a young prince who was, well, destined to outshine everyone.
Alexander was pretty much forged in the fire of two huge clashing personalities. You had his father, King Philip II, who was this brilliant general, totally obsessed with conquest. Then you had his mother, Olympias, an incredibly ambitious and intense woman who taught him he had a divine destiny. Their marriage was a complete disaster, and Alexander grew up caught right in the middle of these two powerhouses.
Now, Philip didn't just train Alexander for war. He gave him the best education money could buy. I mean, his personal tutor was the philosopher Aristotle. So he's learning logic, geography, philosophy, but at the same time, he's getting brutal hands-on experience. By the time he was 17, he was already commanding part of his dad's army. It's this incredible combination of brain and brawn that would really fuel his obsession with conquering the East.
So picture this. Philip is on the very brink of launching this massive invasion of Persia. And then, boom, he's assassinated at a festival. Just like that. At only 20 years old, Alexander is suddenly the king. His father's lifelong dream of conquering Persia, it's all on his shoulders now. But before he could even think about Persia, Alexander had a huge crisis to deal with at home. His father's death was seen as a moment of weakness, right? And all the Greek states that Philip had conquered, well, they weren't about to just bow down to some 20-year-old they'd never even heard of. The second the news of Philip's death got out, rebellion just erupted everywhere. Powerful city-states all across Greece saw their chance to throw off Macedonian rule. I mean, Alexander's entire inheritance, and probably his life, were hanging by a thread. And leading the charge was the very proud, very powerful city of Thebes. They openly defied Alexander's authority. They were basically the ultimate test of whether he could actually rule. So how he handled Thebes was going to send a message to all of Greece.
And the message he sent was absolutely terrifying. Alexander besieged Thebes and just crushed it. I mean, he didn't just beat their army. He razed the entire city to the ground and sold every single person into slavery. This one act of calculated brutality worked. The revolts just stopped. Overnight.
With Greece now dead silent and firmly under his thumb, Alexander could finally turn to his father's great ambition. He gathered the army Philip had built, a combined force of Greeks and Macedonians, 50,000 strong, ready to finally invade the Persian Empire.
So, in 334 BC, Alexander crosses into Anatolia, what we now call Turkey, which was Persian territory. The greatest war of the ancient world was officially on.
You have to understand, the odds were just insane. The Persian king, Darius III, ruled this massive empire with what seemed like endless resources. He put together this enormous army, totally confident that he could just swat this arrogant young invader like a fly. But then came the Battle of Issus, and Alexander's superior tactics and the sheer discipline of his army led to a completely shocking victory. The much, much larger Persian army was totally routed. In all the chaos, King Darius himself actually fled the battlefield, leaving his own mother, wife, and kids behind as Alexander's prisoners. And this is where we see a really key part of Alexander's strategy. He could be absolutely ruthless, like he was at Thebes, but he could also be surprisingly gracious. By treating Darius's captured family with honor and respect, he wasn't just some barbarian invader. He was presenting himself as a legitimate, chivalrous king. Of course, not every city fell so easily. The island fortress of Tyre refused to surrender. So what did Alexander do? Something nobody thought was possible. He ordered his engineers to build a giant causeway, a land bridge, across half a mile of open sea just to get to the city walls. After a brutal 7-month siege, Tyre fell.
You can bet that after the horrifying example he made of Tyre, the next big prize, Egypt, was a lot more cooperative. They were sick of Persian rule anyway, so they basically welcomed Alexander as a liberator. And it was here in Egypt that he would create one of his most lasting legacies. Right there on the coast, he founded the city of Alexandria. And this would become his most enduring creation. It became this incredible hub of culture and learning for centuries, long after his empire had crumbled into dust.
So, at this point, Alexander is the master of the entire eastern Mediterranean. But Darius is still out there, gathering another huge army in the heart of his empire. You just knew a final, massive showdown was coming.
And that final battle came at Gaugamela. This is where Alexander perfected his hammer and anvil tactic. His infantry would pin the enemy line, that's the anvil, while his cavalry circled around to deliver the crushing blow, the hammer. Once again, his tactical genius just overcame superior numbers, and the Persian army was shattered for good.
And just like at Issus, Darius fled the battlefield. But this time, there was no escape. Humiliated by being defeated twice, his own generals turned on him. They murdered their own king before Alexander could even get to him.
Alexander's response to this was brilliant. He hunted down Darius's killers and had them executed for treason. See what he did there? By punishing the kingslayers, he positioned himself as Darius's legitimate avenger and successor. He claimed the throne of Persia for himself.
With the war finally won, Alexander marched on the Persian capital, Persepolis. And there, supposedly in a drunken rage, he ordered the magnificent royal palaces to be burned to the ground. It was this final, brutal act of revenge for Persia's invasion of Greece over a century earlier. The massive Persian treasury? He seized it all and shipped it back to Greece.
So think about it. In less than 5 years, a 25-year-old had conquered the largest empire on earth. He had achieved the impossible. But standing there, among the smoking ruins of Persepolis, the undisputed ruler of the known world, a whole new question had to be asked. What does a conqueror do when there's nothing left to conquer? And what is the ultimate price of that kind of limitless ambition?